before we take a look at the installation of the server and then the agents and then how we use it from the EdgeSight console, let's just have a look at the overall design of the environment, because that's going to be pretty helpful when we start to go through the installation. As kind of medium complex, I'm going to keep it as fairly straightforward as I can. There'll be a couple of things like I'm only going to concentrate on the EdgeSight agents for XenApp, so I'm not going to bother with the endpoints. And again, some of the troubleshooting stuff I'll show you a little bit, but again, you'll just really have to Google that when you get specific errors when you're running it. So first up, we've got our base infrastructure, Citrix servers, and obviously a license server which the Citrix servers use, and hopefully you'll have some kind of SQL data store. Maybe it's just Express. In my example here, we'll be going to using SQL 2005. So probably, but not necessarily, the same database that hosts your data store probably will host your EdgeSight database. Now the next thing is we are going to be using SQL report services. So unlike in the days of 2000, SRS is now included in the install. If for some reason it isn't and you install it, don't forget to reapply the SQL service pack. Sometimes you're going to get errors if you don't do that. But let's get that out of the way first and have that ready to go. If you're in an enterprise, and I can imagine for some rare reason you've got all your databases on the SQL box and there is no SQL report services, you can obviously split that role out back to your EdgeSight server. But most of the time, SQL report services will be installed. So here we come to the separate server for essentially a website that's going to provide you access to the console. It'll be in control of your report access, etc. Now that's going to require to communicate with the same license server that your Citrix servers do, albeit a slightly different model for EdgeSight, but at least it's on the same, using the same license server, which it didn't used to be when it was first introduced. Now I'm going to be creating a user. In fact, I'm going to be using my Citrix super user in my small environment, but maybe it's a good time to create a separate EdgeSight user so that you can get your support guys to use that, and it'll give you the correct rights to be able to make these queries. Now you need to relate that to the report services with essentially, and there are several ways of doing this, but I'm going to concentrate on a local user using the recommended RS user name, and we're just going to give that the required roles to be able to operate the report services. Essentially it's going to act as a broker between requests from your EdgeSight user. Fairly straightforward to set up, and then we then give it a certain number of roles or rights on SQL report services so that it can carry out those reports on behalf of the requests you make through the EdgeSight console. Part of the architecture is going to be installing the agents, and like I say, we're concentrating purely on the XenApp agents for our Citrix servers. So they're going to update every 15 seconds the metrics that are on that server, plus some other event stuff that's not going to be in 15-second intervals, to a small database. A small Firebird database engine requires its own separate service on the Citrix servers. Now that's going to kind of aggregate into this small Firebird database, and every day, that's just the default configuration, it's going to be uploaded to your EdgeSight database. So when your Citrix support person from the browser goes to the website for your EdgeSight server, essentially it's going to be looking to the back end, and if it's a report, then it's going to invoke the SQL report services to create that report for you, and maybe present it in an Excel spreadsheet where you can do certain manipulations, drill down a little bit. There's a lot more to it than just simply bringing back a report under EdgeSight. And there's also this ability to have a real-time dashboard, so that requires Flash within the browser, but you're actually going directly to the device to get the latest information, and it's obviously a little bit more load on those devices should you do that. And it also gives you kind of just a bit like in the old days when you had all your servers in your environment and they were all supposed to have green lights on, no amber, no red, that kind of thing. So it's sort of a bit like going back to, say, an old days and just having a screen up showing which servers were performing okay and which ones were under strain. So that finally leaves us, I've kept all the protocols, and most of this is internal to the LAN, so you're not going to need to open any ports. I've not considered the endpoint, EdgeSight for endpoint, so we don't need to open port 9035 out to the outside world. But even so, it's reasonably complex.